Deion Sanders is catching a lot of flack for his recruiting, but is he doing it right and everyone else is doing it wrong? Or what's the method here? We're going to talk about that.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. Joining me today is special guest Scott Procter from the Coloradoan. Scott's going to dive into everything Coach Prime and Deion Sanders with me because we got a lot to talk about. But first, I want you guys to know that this episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcast. Scott, thank you for joining us. We're talking recruiting. I think it's kind of like this weird time of the year where everyone is criticizing someone for something that they're doing. And Coach Prime is catching a lot of flack for his 6-man recruiting class. And let me be honest, I had some comments about it because I was like, that's unorthodoxly small. I do think if he wanted to, he could slap together a top 10 class in about 5 minutes. So
right.
That's always interesting to me. But talk to me about why people are coming after Coach Prime so aggressively for this class and his methods.
Well, I think it's partly because of who he is, because he's Coach Prime and he's such a polarizing figure and such a polarizing, sport like that is college football, especially nowadays. I mean, again, you talked about it. I mean, what he's done is unorthodox, only signing 6 high school, recruits to this 2024 class. But, if you look at it, 24/7 Sports overall, this Colorado 2024 class I think is ranked like 98th or 99th overall or something. But if you include the 18 transfers, the number 2 ranked transfer class that Coach Prime has also brought in, that leaves the Buffs at around the 21st ranked overall recruiting classes, which again, adds in transfers and high school signees. So, say what you want about the low number. And yeah, the number 6 does kind of not look great when you're talking about bringing in fresh new talent from the high school ranks. But, when you got a quarterback like Deion Sanders and you got maybe definitely the most versatile player in college football, considering he won the Paul Hornung Award, which is Travis Hunter, and you got a bunch of other pieces that are ready to win and play right now, that's what you got to do. You got to dress and get better for 2024, and that's what these 18 transfer recruits did. And also, too, people like to just look at the number 6 for this high school class. Those are some talented kids. Like Jordan Seaton, obviously, we don't really got to spend too much time talking about him. He's the number 1 tackle in the country. Everybody wanted him on their team, and he chose Coach Prime and the Buffs. We're talking about Draylon Miller, a 4-star receiver who had offers from everywhere. He was originally committed to Texas A&M. This kid is a baller. He's going to be able to come in and step and play, contribute right away as a freshman. There's other guys as well. Kyron Michael did a feature story on him, another athlete who can probably play either DB or receiver. He's just lightning in a bottle. Eric Brantley Jr., defensive lineman. He just won Georgia, the highest class in Georgia, 7A. He just won the Defensive Player of the Year. He had a crazy high school career, over 100 tackles for loss, third high school career. So, you can say what you want about the number 6 and the low number of high school signees, but if you take everything into consideration with this impressive transfer portal class as well, the Buffs are set up really nicely for 2024 as they obviously head into the Big 12.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to take away from the recruiting class too, and you could agree or disagree, is if you look at their average on 24/7 Sports, it is up there. It is a top 25. Yeah. Top 25-ish average nationally. And it's just one of those things where I look at Coach Prime's recruiting and it's like, I think he could probably do a lot better in terms of like bringing in a 25-person class that's probably 15th in the country. Yeah, he definitely could. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how this team works out, because I talked about a few days ago, a lot of people think he's all in on 2024 because he's probably leaving with his sons. We'll get there when we get there. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he would sign up to coach college football for 3 or 4 years just to bounce when his kids leave. But I had a different stance on it. I was like, why would he not go all in on 2024? When you look at the Big 12 is probably the worst conference in the country next year. It's wide open. A lot of things to compete for. And I wanted to go back to Jordan Seaton before we move on, because you were obviously following it. I was following it. I was kind of refreshing the old Twitter. I was like, or the X, whatever you call it. And I was like, okay, what is this kid up to? Because it was like commits on national television, by the way.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, Maryland's in the picture. It's like, why is Maryland in the picture? Okay, he's from the DMV. Okay, that makes sense. But why is what is Maryland's pitch where they're all of a sudden coming in at the 12th hour and like flipping things around. So talk to me about how big of a win that was for Coach Prime and just Colorado in general to win out on a 5-star that had Oregon, Maryland, Tennessee, and Alabama all coming for him.
I mean, it's huge. I mean, you really can't understate how big of a get Jordan Seaton was for this Colorado program in particular. Not only is he one of the best tackles in the country, he's also one of the best flat-out players, regardless of position, in the entire country. And it also comes at a position of need. Obviously, we saw how beat up and battered Deion Sanders was at certain points of the year last year. It obviously caused him to miss the last game of the year with a fracture in his back. So protection was arguably the top priority for Colorado this offseason. If not 1A, then it was definitely 1B. And Jordan Seaton is probably the best commodity you could have had to address, that need. And obviously, with him being such a big figure and using social media and, not just, being, somebody who just, plays football and goes home. Like, he's active on social media. So he's going to be active in recruiting and getting other players, maybe not this cycle, but moving forward, people are going to want to come. High profile, high recruits are going to want to come and join Seaton in Boulder, especially if they do what they're supposed to do in 2024. So Seaton is a big on the field, but he's also maybe just as big, if not bigger, to what this program can do in the future off the field. So that was just a huge, and all the build up to it was necessary because look at the opposite. If they lost out on Seaton, we'd be having a lot different discussions right now about Colorado's recruiting class and their offseason as a whole. So that was kind of the biggest part of it, and being able to land him was just huge.
Do you think it was planned? Everyone keeps bringing up the Travis Hunter transfer portal YouTube video where it was like, get me to 100,000 subs and I'll announce my decision. Was this Jordan Seaton kind of playing the game a little bit, or do you think it was just maybe he was genuinely deciding?
I think his heart truly was always with Coach Prime and the Buffs since he committed on Undisputed, like we all saw on national television. But I also do think that there was some legitimate second guessing going on Jordan Seaton's part. When you have, schools like Tennessee and Ohio State in your hometown, Maryland, showing real interest in you. And you got to remember too, Jordan Seaton has been playing at IMG, which is not at his hometown in the DMV area. So it would have made a lot of sense, at least to me, for him to want to go back to home and play for, another black head coach in Loxley at Maryland, which again, that would have made sense to me. But, ultimately and luckily for Colorado and Coach Prime, Seaton, honored his commitment and is headed to Boulder.
Yeah, it was just one of those things. It was like, I think it was part of a game. I also think it was just a teenager. I talked about this frequently on my episodes where I was like, you guys have to realize, think back to when you were 16, 17, 18. Could you have made a decision confidently that's going to impact your next years of life and be like, okay, I'm standing on this. And then other people come with more enticing offers. Exactly. It's a tough game, this recruiting game.
And that's what a lot of these grown men don't understand. And partly is because they never experienced it. And to talk about somebody like Jordan Seaton and how they're handling a situation that you've never been in is kind of silly. And again, for myself personally, I played football. I played D3 in Northern Wisconsin. And obviously I wasn't the caliber of player Jordan Seaton, didn't, anything like that. But I didn't make my decision over I was going to go to college until April of my senior year. So this is, a month before graduation, a few months before, fall camp is supposed to start. So for him to, make this, much bigger decision way earlier than me personally, I would have had to made it. I can't imagine. So my hat's off to him and his family for, coming through and making what looks like to be a great decision.
Not to mention, people are throwing the bag at him. It's tough when people are throwing the bag at you. It's a tough one. Man. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the documentary series and how it kind of gives us an insight on where Colorado struggled and maybe why they struggled. But first, a word from our sponsors over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you guys for tuning in, making Locked On Buffs your first listen every day. I'm joined by Scott Procter. Scott, we got a lot to talk about still. It's one of those things where not a lot of people are dropping documentaries about your team, especially not a lot of people are dropping because I was on a radio show one time and they were like, how many camera crews are around Coach Prime? And I was like, honestly, I think there's at minimum 2 every day, because there's like his son's group of well-off media. Then there was the Amazon group. So there's a lot of camera crews around him. And the thing that I was most interested to see on this documentary, because we knew about it for months now, was how they handled adversity. And I think that's kind of where Colorado fell off. The wheels fell off. It was they lose to Stanford. That was obviously a tough game for them. You go up 29, end up losing the game. And then it's one of those things where everyone's basically mocking you. Coach Prime's like, get ready for that love to flip on social media. But what was something that stood out to you on the doc about how they handled adversity, and just like maybe something that I didn't notice?
For sure. I mean, honestly, the thing that stood out to me, at least watching these most 2 recent episodes, episode 4 and episode 5, is really Coach Prime's coaching style. And he's really an old school coach. And again, somebody who played football throughout his entire life through college. I got a chance to play under a lot of different coaches. And Coach Prime, and again, his old school coaching style is just simply not for everybody. And I feel like you didn't really get that throughout the first couple episodes, especially because, they're winning, so you don't really get to see that other side of him. But, he keeps it real, man. I remember during the Stanford game on the doc, and when Stanford was starting to make that comeback, Coach Prime just looks at the sideline and goes, y'all choking. And that's not something that, a lot of players can, deal with the right way inside when they hear somebody like their coach say that. But he's keeping it real. And that is what they were doing. Anybody who watched that game would tell you that that's exactly what they were doing in that moment to a team that they were better than, more talented than in Stanford. Having a 29-0 lead and blowing that is really unheard of, especially in the fashion that they did. But just, again, his old school kind of way of coaching is really just kind of offset by his young heart, because he's still prime time at heart. And I feel like he's still able to, relate to his players like Travis Hunter, like Shedeur, and, do everything with the NIL and the money movement to keep things rolling the way they should be. But I just found that dynamic to be so stark between the old school coach that Coach Prime is, but still being kind of the young at heart that these players still love, because you need both of them. You can't be one guy all the time, and you can't balance between the two all the time either. You got to find, kind of that right balance. And I feel like he's been able to do that, but kind of seeing them lose though in these most 2 recent episodes of the doc was definitely some eye-opening stuff, and stuff that they're going to have to learn from, because again, not every college football season is going to be simple. It's not all going to be roses. And again, I loved his message after the game too, because, he said, y'all been getting a lot of love, and rightfully so, for that hot start. Everybody was talking about Colorado football for the first handful of weeks of that college football season, but they're still going to be talking after you lose, but it's just going to be a different tune. And Coach Prime let him know that right away after that game. And he was right.
Yeah, it was definitely a flip of the switch. I think the thing that stood out to me the most too, and I talked about this yesterday, was he is very cutthroat. Like he went up to Shedeur at one time and was like, you just cost us a field goal. Like he literally went up to him and was like, you just cost us 3 points. And I think a lot of people, when they think of the dynamic, they're like, it's daddy ball, it's Nepo ball. And it's like, did he announce his son as a starter before he was at Colorado? Yes. Is his son probably one of the better quarterbacks in college football? Also, yes. But I think it was the criticism and that relationship between coach and father that I was interested in, because I wanted to see, especially when he throws, because Shedeur Sanders, they didn't really, I don't think they showed Coach Prime talking about it with him. But in that Stanford game specifically, there was quite a few throws where it was like overthrow here, underthrow here. And Coach Prime, you could tell, does not take it easy on anyone. And I think that was something that a lot of people thought he would do. And then also, he talks to the team, and I think this was after the UCLA game, or maybe the Stanford game, I don't remember, where he's in the team meeting room, and they have the offense stand up, and he goes, I'll replace every one of you. I don't care. And then calls out an individual offensive lineman. He's like, why have you not taken their spot? Like, I think the thing about Coach Prime is that's so interesting is he's, I won't say older. Everyone's older to us. We're in our 20-somethings, right? But like he's in his 50s, nearly 60s, I think it is. And he's in touch. Like he knows what's going on. He knows what's cool. But at the same time, like you mentioned, he comes from that era where it was 2 episodes ago now where everyone was getting injured at practice. And he was like, I never
hilarious.
Yeah. I never let someone carry me off the field. And I just think you see his mix of like, it's it's like the cool dad almost. He's like the cool dad. And then there's every once in a while where it's like, oh damn, he is not playing games. Like he is
Right.
old
He's
school
still
as
dad.
it gets.
Right. For sure. No,
But
yeah,
what
that
if-
dynamic. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say at the end of this episode, I think we get teased a little bit. Obviously, there's only 6 episodes, I believe. So I don't think they're going to dive into it that much. But we're about to go to the Sean Lewis changing of the guard, if you will.
Sure.
What are your expectations for the behind the scenes of that? Like, obviously, we know what happened in public, but what do you think is like the behind the scenes vibes of that?
I mean, honestly, I think it's going to play out probably more amicably than people think, because again, everything that's been said by both Coach Lewis and Coach Prime since the two sides have kind of went through different ways. Obviously, Coach Lewis is now the head coach at San Diego State. Everything that both of them have said since they've kind of separated has been positive, and it didn't seem like a forced positive. Like, I appreciate Coach Prime for everything. Like it seemed like a genuine. I wouldn't be the head coach at San Diego State today if Coach Prime didn't give me that opportunity to join the Buffs. And lead that offense. So I think it's going to play out fine. I did see the one kind of little teaser scene, and I don't remember which game it was, but it might have been the UCLA game where Coach Prime looks at Coach Lewis and he goes, "Get the ball out of his hands quicker." And he looks at Shedeur, he goes, "Get the ball out of your hands quicker." And I feel like that's kind of just Coach Prime's coaching style in a nutshell. Like, he doesn't put everything on one person, whether it be a player or a coach. Like, everything is a collaborative effort. And that's what it was offensively for Colorado this past season. And it worked for about, a fourth to the first half of the season. But you face tougher defenses and teams get more film on you and they're able to adjust and things get more difficult. But, ultimately, I don't envision that kind of, breakup between Coach Prime and, Coach Lewis being, anything more than, just needing to do something different offensively, which they obviously had to. Shedeur was getting sacked way too much. The offense wasn't nearly explosive as it was in the first half of the season. I'm interested to see how Pat Shurmur is introduced, though, and how the team and Shedeur in particular kind of reacts to that change, being, a different voice kind of maybe in his ear during practice or on game days. Sounded like, again, Coach Prime said after the season that Shurmur and Shedeur communicated really well. So I'm kind of interested to see how that was kind of captured on the documentary.
Yeah, because I think there's going to be a little bit bad blood. Excuse me. I think if you're Sean Lewis, you obviously quit a head coaching job to come here. So I feel like maybe they don't show that, though, because obviously that probably caused a lot of drama in and of itself. But I really think that there's going to be like an interesting tidbit, or like I hope to see that meeting where it's like, we're just going to go away from you. It's just not working, because obviously everyone thinks they're the best at what they do in every field. Like, if you don't think you're the best at what you do, probably shouldn't be in that field. But I think also, I forgot to run this by you as well, my biggest takeaway from this doc so far is how this team handles adversity. And I think they were not ready for, I think the 3-0 start, as weird as it's going to sound, may have been like detrimental to their growth the rest of the season, because they were like on cloud, I don't even know what's above cloud 9, but they were up there. And then all of a sudden they plummet back down to earth, and they just did not know how to react. And I think it's kind of a mixture of, you bring in players from all over, which is great in essence, but at the same time, they all handle things differently. Right. You have a new staff who's working together. So I feel like the establishing of the culture, we didn't get to see a lot of in the doc, but I do think it was definitely a stark change from weeks 1, 2, 3, and then weeks 4 through whatever.
No doubt about it. I think one thing that Start did is it kind of just masked a lot of the problems that were just obviously there with a new head coach and a completely new roster. Like, I think if people said before the season started, Colorado is going to have some really good moments, they're going to win some games, but they're going to finish 4-8. People would be like, okay, I can see that in a relatively tough conference with a new head coach and a new staff and new players. Like, that's not the end of the world. But if you say they're going to start 3-0 and then finish 4-8, people are going to be like, I don't really know about that. And that's just kind of really how the cards kind of shook out. Again, the 3-game winning streak to start the season was impressive. But when you play tougher teams, and I think we can talk about it a little bit too, they played a gauntlet of NFL caliber quarterbacks that season. Obviously, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Cam Ward, DJU from Oregon State. Like, that's literally half their losses that came to NFL caliber quarterbacks. that ain't going to be the same in 2024 in the Big 12. Like, they're going to face some talented guys. Like, I'm interested to see if Arizona's quarterback Noah Fifita comes back. There's been some rumors that he might enter the transfer portal. That boy can ball. But that might be that's probably going to be the toughest quarterback that Colorado sees, at least during the regular season in 2024. Maybe Dylan Raiola as well, but he's going to be a true freshman, probably playing for Nebraska. But they're not going to be facing the caliber of quarterbacks that they saw last year, and that's going to bode well. That should lead to more wins, something I'm expecting for sure.
Yeah, and I like the little segue there. What a professional by the guy Scott over here. We're gonna talk about the Big 12 outlook, but first, a word from our sponsors over at Prize Picks. If you guys don't know about Prize Picks, let me tell you, because Prize Picks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. And now I can play during basketball season too. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball with the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you go LeBron James plus Taylor Swift's boyfriend Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. Or if you want to play along with some of the biggest celebrities, you can play with rapper Meek Mill, Andrew Schultz, the comedian. You just go to the community place under the promos tab to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Pick community each week. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. Okay, we are back. We're talking about the Big 12 outlook. First, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Buffs your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Big 12 outlook. You kind of hinted at it. I talked about it earlier. I look at this Big 12 conference. Colorado's win total already, according to betonline.ag, was 6 for next year. So that feels reasonable. I think it was reasonable just in the sense that they're going to improve, and I think they improved this roster anyway. But then I look at this Big 12, and I'm like, okay, Kansas is solid. Jalen Daniels is never healthy, though, so I'm not going to count on them until I see a healthy Jalen Daniels all year. Utah has Cam Rising back. I think they'll be solid as always. You mentioned Arizona. If they keep Noah Fifita and T-Mac, they're going to be really good. And then it's like Iowa State, West Virginia's on the up, but are they going to sustain it? Okay, and then I just look around and I'm like, I see a lot of teams that could be good. But when I looked at the Pac-12 this year, I was like, they have 6 caliber playoff teams or playoff caliber teams. And I think Colorado has a legitimate chance to contend for the Big 12 title or at least be in the conversation towards the end of the season. What do you think?
No doubt about it. I completely agree with you. I mean, again, I would look at, Arizona and Utah again, and those are going to be tough games, especially it looks like it's going to be earlier on in CU's schedule in 2024. I also think UCF, Central Florida, that's going to be on the road for Colorado in Orlando. I think that could also be a sneaky, difficult game. That's going to be a game that they're going to have to be locked into if they really want to win. But I agree with you. Again, the Big 12 just does not scare you, to the level that the Pac-12 did at least last year. And I think for that reason and for the fact that the Buffaloes undeniably improved their roster from one year to the next, from obviously from last year to this year, with all the offseason moves from the transfer portal, from those 6 high school signees, at least 4 of them, I think are going to be able to contribute right away. So I think for those reasons, they're going to be able to be right in the thick of the Big 12 race. And again, it really just comes down to really 2 things for me. First off, protecting Shedeur Sanders. I mean, what he was able to do last year, if you just look at his numbers at face value, he set Colorado's single-season passing record with over 3,200 yards. I think he threw 27 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions all year. That is impressive stuff, and especially when you consider the fact that he did it behind a poor offensive line, that none of that will be back next year, at least in the starting role, you would think. Maybe Mr. Washington, finds some playing time back on the offensive line. But that offensive line is probably going to be completely rebuilt with guys who are experienced FBS transfers. So if he's protected better, him being Shedeur, and on defense, they're able to stop the run better. I believe they gave up almost 180 yards on the ground per game last season, which was second worst in the Pac-12. The additions of DJ Lundy, the linebacker from Florida State, he was Pro Football Focus's highest ranked linebacker against the run last season. So he should be a huge addition. They added some beef on the defensive line. I mean, guys like Anquin Barnes, Quincy Wiggins, Chidozie Nwankwu from Houston. I'd actually talked to Chidozie's defensive line coach at Houston just a couple weeks ago, because we go back a little bit, and he was just telling me that boy's going to be an instant, immediate impact on the defensive line, stopping the run, getting pressure on the quarterback. So them just being improved on both sides of the ball in the trenches gives me reason to think that, they should be able to push for 8, 9, maybe 10 wins and really compete in this new Big 12.
Yeah, I totally agree. I said it multiple times throughout the season. People get upset about this, but I said if the defense line had a pulse and could stop the run at all, they'd be a 7-8 win team. If the offense line was average, like it doesn't need to be like the best in the country. They don't need to be contending for the Joe Moore offensive line of the year award.
Yeah.
They just need to be average. Like if they cut the sacks from, I think it was 56 is the magic number, quote unquote magic. If they cut that to like 30, Shadur Sanders is probably going to throw for like 5,000 yards.
Yeah,
like,
and the fact that they had virtually zero running game for the entire season. Like Shadur led the team in rushing yards. I believe Dylan Edwards, who was really more of a pass-catching running back. He's a talented player, really more of a pass-catching running back. He led the team in rushing, and I think that has more to do with, again, the offensive line more than the talent at the running back position, because I expect with that offensive line improved, I expect Dylan Edwards to have a much better season on the ground. I expect Alton McCaskill, who was used a little bit in the second half of the year. If you guys remember a couple years ago, he was a dog at Houston, like a dog at Houston. And I know Coach Prime was excited to get him as a transfer last year. We didn't get to see him a ton this past season, but I think, again, with an improved offensive line, they're going to have a ground game. Shadur's going to be protected, and they got weapons galore. We haven't really talked about that, but they've got serious weapons on the outside, starting obviously with Travis Hunter. Will Shepherd, I think, is going to be probably end up being the biggest transfer addition. The wide receiver from Vanderbilt, he's going to step right into Xavier Weaver's role, who was really good in that role last year. Obviously, Jimmy Horn Jr. is back. They picked up a tight end from Cincinnati, a transfer, Chamo Mateo, who can really go up and get the ball, make explosive plays down the field. And obviously a couple freshmen, again, I mentioned earlier, Draylon Miller. I think he can contribute catching the ball right away as a freshman. So they got some really good guys. A couple other transfers from, Terrell Timmons, obviously as well. Cordell Russell, baby T.O. So they got some real weapons at Shadur's disposal. And if he's protected, it should be fireworks pretty much every weekend.
Yeah, when I saw the Will Shepherd edition, I was like, okay, this offense just changed because
he's different.
Will Shepherd, first of all, obviously it's Vanderbilt, so it's not like Alabama, but he comes from an SEC conference where he's faced the best defenses. Yep. He didn't have the best quarterback play and still put up big numbers.
Correct.
Obviously, I think Jimmy Horn is a really good receiver. I think Travis Hunter, which I'm still on the Travis Hunter needs a pitch count train. I just think he does, at least on defense.
I'll be testing to see how they play that this year.
Yeah, and so I was excited for Will Shepherd because part of me thinks that Jimmy Horn can't be your best receiver. I just feel like he gets in his head a lot, and there's times where he takes himself out of the game. I don't think Travis Hunter should be your best receiver. He is going to be the best receiver just because he's probably the best college football player, but he needs some rest. I think it's just a lot to expect of one person, and Travis is never going to be like, yeah, I'm tired, but you could tell when he was tired, and it usually shows up on defense because obviously they're targeting him. Like the Stanford game, I think they targeted him 13 times. I'm not even joking. Like they
was
literally
eye-opening to see them target him the way they did and have success the way they did.
They literally were like, "Where's Travis? Okay, we're throwing the ball that way." So it was just one of those things that whereas I think he needs some rest. But Will Shepherd, very excited about. I think the tight end, Chamo Montier, he's going to be really good. He's going to be a different dynamic that they didn't have blocking wise because obviously they couldn't block for a lick. And then receiving wise, he's probably going to be Shadur's safety blanket realistically. And so a lot of things to be excited about. But before we go, Scott, I want you to give me an importance of 1 to 10. I'm going to give you a scenario, and you have to tell me how important it will be next season. So a positive run game, 1 to 10.
A positive run game. That's pretty high up there in terms of importance. I would give that like a 7.5, 8.
Okay. I think the same thing. I think they need Alton McCaskill to kind of return to form. I wasn't mad that they shut him down. The only thing that confused me was the constant advertising of he's back, he's ready, and then he'd be 3 carries, and I was like, if he's ready, then what is he ready for?
But I also feel like a lot of the game script just dedicated, at least, and again, Sean Lewis, Pat Shermer might have to answer that, but it did feel like a lot of the game script were early on in games where it's it doesn't really make sense to run the ball, especially with somebody like McCaskill when you're behind, multiple scores. But that's going to be hugely important for them to have some semblance of a run game to help Shadur, to help that offensive line.
The offensive line, obviously, very important. But how important is it that they limit sacks and also establish a run? We'll do two separate. So limit sacks, that's probably a 10, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that'd be a 10. I mean, you have to keep Shadur upright. You have to keep him healthy. If God forbid something happens to him, I mean, the season is season's pretty much a wrap, you know?
And you definitely don't want him taking hits. He's really smart about, and I think a lot of people give him credit for this, is he's really smart in terms of, except when he's holding the ball a little too long, but he knows how to not take hits. Like, he doesn't get tackled very often. He's good at sliding. He's good at running out of bounds. And so the other one, block the run game, because everyone's talking about these new linemen and they're all graded fairly well in pass blocking, but run blocking is where some of them struggle. So give me importance of the run game.
From an offensive line perspective, again, I think this team is never going to be a run-first team or a run-heavy team with Shadur Sanders at quarterback. So I give that about a 6 because, again, I think these offensive linemen, in particular, the ones that they brought in the transfer portal, man, they're number one. I mean, you see him probably talking about it on Twitter, DT2, don't touch 2, don't touch Shadur Sanders. Like, that's the motto going into the season, and that's priority number one. Obviously, they're going to have to run the ball, and they will be able to, just off the fact that there's more talent in the offensive line room this year as opposed to last year. But again, this is never going to be a run-heavy team, so they're gonna go with Shadur in his arm, and those weapons kind of take them. But you're going to have some semblance of a run game for sure. So I give it about a 6 though.
And then the last one, this one's a little out there, but the importance of establishing a culture that can handle adversity. Because obviously I think that was an issue that they had last year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's of utmost important. I mean, I would give that a 10 out of 10. I honestly think Coach Prime has done a solid job of bringing in guys who fit that culture. Because again, it's one thing for a coach and the coaching staff to want that type of culture for your team, but you also got to have players who, take heed to that and want it for themselves too. So I think, again, with 24 new guys with 18 transfers and 6 high school commits, I think that group of guys is built to, handle adversity and fight back. So that's important. And I think Coach Prime and that staff has done a good job of assembling guys who, kind of fit that mold here this offseason.
Yeah, 2 things you don't want to see next year. Your coach questioning if you love football.
Yeah.
2, the coach asking what their identity is. I think it was like week 11, and we were discussing what Colorado's identity was. I was like, that is not great. But what is great is Scott. So, Scott, tell the people where they can find you and talk about your work and what you're up to.
Appreciate it, my guy. Yeah, I mean, I just moved out here to Colorado about a month ago, covering Coach Prime and the Buffs, some hoops too for CU. You can follow me on Twitter at Scott Procter _ I should say probably X now, formerly known as Twitter, but you can also follow my work at Coloradoan.com. Again, I'm covering Buffs, football and basketball, recruiting, transfer portal, Coach Prime, all of it. Holla at your boy. Appreciate you having me on, though, Kevin. It's been a blast.
Yeah, I appreciate you for hopping on. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in and making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. I will see you guys on Monday. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Safe New Year. Everyone be safe and don't get too tipsy. Let's save it. Let's save it for the remainder of the year. I hope you guys have a great day. I will see you guys on Monday.